What is up, YouTube? Live via satellite here, and today we are talking Kingdom, manga chapter 539. And to me, it is hilarious that one character can provoke such a wide array of emotions. I mean, last week, no matter how much you dislike Heki or like Heki, deep down, somewhere inside you, there was a small little voice saying, because no matter what you thought of Heki as a character, he's been here since the beginning. And knowing that his life was on the line caused you to feel a certain type of way. But it is also very amazing that by the end of this chapter, and seeing what actually happened instead of what we thought was going to happen, you may have felt more like this.
This guy is fucking stupid!
And that is the enigma known as Heki. But in the place of Heki's death this chapter, we got something far more priceless. If the many faces of Heki were an art gallery, we'd have such classics as Osen Played Me and Why Am I Here? But this chapter, Hera unveiled his masterpiece, simply titled,
You done fucked up now!
Alright, so the chapter starts out with Raboku watching the sun set on the second day of battle. And as the sun goes down, Raboku rises to go and visit Gyo-eun's camp. And this surprises Kane, who decides to tag along. So right away we get to see that Hera decided to end the second day, and we also get to see that if Gyo-eun's getting involved right now, then that must mean that the center armies are probably going to begin fighting on the third day, which is pretty much the last battlefield that we haven't seen any action from. Over at Kishui, we see that he's pondering off in the distance, but we get to see that Bate is really frustrated about how his enemy was just dancing around all day. And he actually compares them to a bunch of flies, which should definitely demonstrate how annoying Moten actually was on the second day of battle. Bate is so frustrated that we actually see him break through a table, which is pretty impressive because it's not as easy as you may think.
Finish him! Flawless victory. Fatality.
Over at Moten, we see that the second day of battle ended in a stalemate, which considering the Kishui army's numbers and strength is exactly what Moten wanted. While the Kishui army was using the hard approach led by Bate, the Moten army used soft counters to pretty much wind up victorious for the second day. Meanwhile, over on the right flank, we see that Ohan is met with cheers from the Akko army. Banyo's in shock, but Kanjo lets him know that Akko's men have a keener eye for battle than your average soldier, and that they know how big an impact Ohan had on today's battle. We actually get to see that even though Bananji himself was able to escape, that his army was reduced to the point that they could no longer rally themselves into fighting shape. Alright guys, so in this next section, we get a little bit of dialogue from Kanjo, and this dialogue is actually very interesting, but there appears to be a little bit of an error where it says Ohan's name. I think it should be Osen's name, and it makes much more sense when you actually say Osen's name. So in my opinion, it should read more like this. And of course, everyone's going to be happy from seeing how despite being alienated from the Osen army from his very first campaign and never having been allowed a spot within the army to show his true worth, the young master who is next in line was able to demonstrate such a keen understanding of tactics that rivaled even Lord Osen in these men's hearts. And this whole passage just gives us another glimpse into the relationship between Osen and Ohan, and we still see how torn and fragmented it is, which really makes me more and more curious about what exactly happened in this father-son relationship to make it so bad like this. But it looks like Ohan is winning respect a little at a time, because now even Akko has to admit this man's talent. And he even requests that he comes to Akko's headquarters once he's tended to his wounds so that they can begin planning the strategy for the next day. Kanjo and Banyo are shocked. It seems like Ohan is finally moving up from the kiddies table. Over at Shin's camp, Bihei of all people goes into an outburst about how both the Gyokuho and the Gakuka units are kicking ass on the left and the right, while they haven't had their chance to shine and are pretty much getting left in the dust. But Ko calls him out saying, "Weren't you the one saying I hope they just win without us like 20 times already?" But Bihei denies.
It wasn't me.
But Garo says it's not like we haven't had any action. Unlike you slow turtles, the elite cavalry was this close to catching Raboku. And with that comment, things begin to spiral out of control. We see that Sugen and Sosa both take offense to these comments. Even Dene finds himself being dragged into the mix, and even though Bihei and some of the others try to calm the situation down, only Shin's fist can restore order to the camp. And Shin says he knows that they're all anxious to get into battle and that their time to shine will come, but he says that doesn't mean you should be making asses of yourselves in front of the newbies, and that this is not the first time that they've had to go through this sort of thing. So until their time comes, they need to wait patiently like grown-ups. Then we hear from Sosa and Danae that hearing what Ohan did today really sent Shin off the edge, and that he's pretty much lost it. We actually see him punt a table in frustration. And tables have really had it hard this chapter, but punting is very therapeutic.
He's been thrown out of the game. You know what? He's going to kick it again. He'll miss some games now. Struck person.
Then we get to see that the guys were pretty much just messing around because they were bored, but Sosa does know that all this waiting probably does have the newbies on edge. Since they embarrassed themselves in Retsubi, they were really looking forward to making up for it in this war, but sitting and waiting so far from the fighting where they can't even see it has them making an effort just to stay focused. Sugen tells them it's okay to loosen up, but just keep their morale high, because with a single word from Osen, they could be sent right into the thick of it. And here we actually get a glimpse of the Archer brothers, Jin and Tan, who we haven't really seen that much. And it looks like from the panels that Tan still seems to be a little bit out of his element. Then we see Ten yelling to everyone that dinner's ready, and we see Kyokai literally teleport directly in front of Ten. And as the men are eating, you see Ten watching nervously. And she sees that some of them are starting to notice that the portions are a bit smaller than they usually are. And then Shin teleports in front of Ten, asking her, is that true? And also for her to give him more. But Ten then tells Shin that they've only received 3 days worth of supplies from Osen and that there's no more. Shin can't believe that they're already rationing supplies, but Ten and Sosui tell Shin to keep it down because they don't want the other men to find out. And Shin agrees that's probably best because the men would probably think that it's only the second day and they're already starting to run out. And Ten says that she thinks this is probably because of what happened on the first day with Mako. She pretty much thinks that due to Osen's gamble not paying off, that now he may believe that this battle may take longer than he originally intended. And since they don't have any way to resupply, and they only have a certain amount of food, if they intend to stay longer, the only option is to stretch out the food and make it last longer. And due to all the flashy stuff Roku did on the first day, Shin's mind really wasn't on that, but he now remembers that their food supply is also another opponent that they have to deal with in this battle. And I have to admit, I love the way Hera brought this up because it's easy to forget when we think about Gyo and starving them out, that the Quinn forces are actually dealing with the same exact thing. And they're also, in a sense, under a time limit. Then we find ourselves back in Ryoyu, and we see that there's some sort of emergency that requires Heki's attention. And by the look on his face, you can tell that it's bad. Then we see Heki riding, hauling ass somewhere, and he's in a hurry. And during his ride, you see him saying stuff like, an enemy army that large should have been intercepted by a regular army, but then he finds out that none of their armies have had any engagements. But then Heki says that's impossible, and that this whole thing must just be some sort of false alarm, because otherwise there's no way that something like this could be happening, for their entire food stores to be set alight. But unfortunately, at the scene of the crime, Heki sees with his own eyes that everything that he's heard is true. Then we see Sensuiju casually walking through a cave with torches in hand, knowing that he has just dealt the Quinn a massive blow. And that was the chapter in a nutshell, guys. And yeah, surprise, surprise, Sensuiju did something that I don't think many people expected. I mean, this chapter was titled properly, Opponent, because it was really easy to forget about the food supplies being actually another opponent that these armies had to deal with. And to see that Sensuiju, in such a simple move, managed to cripple the Heki and Yotanwa army like this, just shows you what type of military genius this Sensuiju really is. And to see that Osen had already started rationing supplies before this incident occurred, I can only imagine that they're going to have to ration supplies even further if they intend to stay on their campaign. And they may have to grab supplies from all the other armies to resupply the Heki army, which definitely would be something that would impact all of their forces, like we were hinted at last chapter. So we'll definitely have to wait and see how this impacts Osen's plans, because either things are going to have to be moved along faster than he initially expected, or he's going to have a lot of hungry soldiers trying to fight. And neither one of these situations seems like something Osen wants to do. Some other things I really enjoyed in this chapter was I like seeing the dynamic in the Haishin unit, because we haven't really gotten any good development in the Haishin unit for a while. So it's nice to get back to some of these characters, and it'll be interesting to see who will rise out of this batch of newbies, because as we've seen in Moten and Ohan's units, we've had a lot of new guys starting to shine. So I'd expect the same thing to happen in Shin's unit. And even though these guys seem frustrated now, I am sure that Shin and his unit will have the best achievement in this war and somehow manage to outshine both Muten and Ohan. And after seeing what both of these guys are capable of, I really can't imagine what he could possibly do. And another thing I found interesting about the Ohan and Osen stuff is that pretty much the entire Osen army knows that Ohan is shunned. I mean, it seems like it's common knowledge the family business between Ohan and Osen. And this actually kind of makes me view Ohan a little bit different. I think he's kind of embraced being the guy that people don't like, because growing up, even his own father didn't like him, so I'm sure it had some sort of effect on his personality. And I'm sure we'll delve more into that as the story progresses, but it's just something I thought was pretty interesting. But anyway, guys, that about does it for this week's review. Hope you guys had a happy Thanksgiving for those of you who celebrate it. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter in the comment section below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Feel free to share, comment, and subscribe. Peace out.